That one, who sits there? That's the need to represent the state. That two over there.
We found a special door. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the place where the United States was born. Today we are standing in the actual room where 3 of America's founding documents were adopted. Folks, would everyone please take a few seconds to carefully count the number of tables that are arranged here? As you count the tables, did you notice that for the first time in history that a gathering of all colonies assembled in this room? As they met to debate their growing problems with Great Britain, they described themselves as members of the Second Continental Congress. Although we have very little information as to where each delegation was specifically seated in this room, we have evidence that suggests that they were at least seated geographically. As you start over to my right, you start with the colonies of New Hampshire, followed by Massachusetts and Connecticut, followed by New York, Rhode Island, and New Jersey. And then to my left, you begin with Delaware, followed by North Carolina, South Carolina, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Maryland, and Georgia. As delegates began to settle here, they discovered that prior to their arrival, that bullets were fired on the battlefield in Massachusetts. With those shots that were fired at Lexington and
Concord,
famous shots around the world, with those opening shots, the war officially began. Despite the fighting, the delegates were destined to sit for an entire year before agreeing to produce a document which could tell the king and indeed the world the reasons behind the revolution. And they referred to this great document as the Declaration of Independence. Folks, is this the actual Declaration of Independence?
no.
I didn't say it was, but it's only a copy from our gift shop, but not a bad copy. But and folks, if I could ask our students who may be learning about this a question, would anyone like to perhaps mention the name of the person who actually wrote the Declaration of Independence? Yes. It was Thomas Jefferson. Yeah, Jefferson did most of the writing. And folks, you may have heard about this before, but Jefferson was a lawyer by training. And I say this because as you read the Declaration, doesn't it remind you of a charge in a courtroom? Because he will go along to say that he did this and that he did that. Folks, who do you think he was a reference to? Referred to the king, yes. And he pointed out being taxed without full representation in the parliament. He also complained about the housing of British soldiers and the homes of the people. And for all those many complaints, Jefferson found at the time to raise some amazing ideas about liberty and freedom, such as the idea that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. One of the most profound and inspiring words in all of human history. Well, remember Jefferson worked extremely hard on this document, and when he finished writing it, he eagerly shared it with his fellow delegates that were seated in the room. As he circulated this declaration around the room, does anyone happen to remember precisely what these men did to his document? Did they give it an A+ after he wrote it? Yeah.
Some of them made some changes.
They made changes. Absolutely, they made changes. You're right. Multiple changes were made. Did Thomas Jefferson appreciate that? No. In fact, he said this Congress, they mangled my document. But despite those many changes that were made in July, the country was born right here in Philadelphia. Now, fellow delegates, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm a little concerned right now because apparently we just declared independence from the most powerful empire on the face of the planet. Is there at least one country that will help America achieve its freedom and independence? Who's going to help us win this war? Yes. The French. Yeah, France will be our biggest friend, so we have the French. So we have France. Was there anybody else? What about the country? Yeah. Right. I'll mention this. This country is right next to France, right below France. Spain was also militarily involved. And don't forget the Dutch. They'll provide financial support. This will become an international conflict. Well, I know you already heard this before, but I wanted to reiterate that the word divided families. And one particular family that was divided over independence was none other than the family of this signer. Does the name look familiar? The handwriting is perfect. Who is that name? Anybody? Benjamin Franklin. Yes, we have Benjamin Franklin. Well, while Mr. Franklin was working for independence, at the same time, Mr. Franklin's son, William, at the time, he was serving as the royal governor for New Jersey. He was appointed by the king. While the father was supporting independence, who do you think the son was supporting? Suddenly, Wilton King, and the two men never did reconcile. Ultimately, Franklin's son left America. He is actually buried in the city of London. This is an example of a family divided over independence. Folks, would you agree that it's very warm outside today? It's pretty warm out there. Can I explain why it's so warm outside? The reason why it's so warm outside is because it is now the summer of 1787. Now, if you look around the room, folks, you may notice delegates have just gathered here from around the country, and they've actually come here to strengthen a document called the Articles of Confederation, a weak form of government in which the states had most of the power. Now, these men only have permission to correct the articles, but in the time that they meet here, they will very quietly replace the articles in exchange for a strong central government under the U.S. Constitution. Folks, I was wondering whether anyone in this room had the chance to see an amazing Hollywood movie that came out a couple of years ago, and it featured a famous actor by the name of Nicolas Cage. What was that movie called? Did anybody see National Treasure? Wasn't that an amazing movie? That was an awesome film. I love that movie. An incredible film called National Treasure. Well, speaking of national treasures, would you like to see a real national treasure? You want to see a real, take a look at that chair on the platform, because that particular chair is a genuine national treasure. That is the very chair that was used by
George Washington.
George Washington sat in that very chair back in 1787. Now, while His Excellency was sitting in that chair, delegates came together and they compromised over the three parts of the government with their separate checks and powers. They achieved a compromise between the large states and the small states over representation in the legislature. And you're standing in the same room and they made the compromises over the powers and the functions of the president. And ladies and gentlemen, while we're talking about the president, keep in mind, who were these men also facing while they're talking about the president? Who were they staring at? They're looking at the man himself, the very man who one day become the president. In other words, they had George Washington in mind. Now, folks, where do you see this image? Where do you see this image in this room? You know what this is? Where do you see this image in this room? Where do you see it? Yeah, to the back of the chair. That's right, to the back of Washington's chair. Well, the delegate whose name was Benjamin Franklin. Notice this image of the sun, what Washington said. And as they were trying to shape a government, Franklin questioned whether the sun on the chair, or for that matter, whether the nation would represent a rising or a setting sun. Could these men unite and form a constitution? Well, it wasn't until they signed the document that Franklin had the happiness to know that this is a rising and not a setting sun. And that was Franklin's way of showing his belief that these men could overcome their differences and unite, and perhaps this would be a rising and not a setting republic. Well, we would like to end our visit today by saying that the delegates in this room saw the future, knowing that in the future that America would grow and change. So they had the idea to form the Constitution to also reflect those coming changes. And those, my final question is, what is that process called where you make changes to our Constitution? The amendment process. Because we can amend the Constitution, eventually issues such as the question of slavery will ultimately be resolved. By 1920, women will also gain the right to vote. Native Americans and others will also be included, all because of our ability to amend the Constitution. I would like to thank you for your time. Our tour has basically concluded. As you visit other areas, please use the available doors which are situated in the rear. And if you have any questions, try to answer all questions as we go to the rear of Independence Hall.
Thank you.